Okay, so we're gonna make today the medium-sized parachute knapsack. I have everything already cut and interfaced, so let me kind of go over the supplies. I'm using Zipper by the Yard, which is from Bedazzled Supplies. I will put a link in the description box to all of the suppliers that I used. This is like, it's got rainbow teeth. Zipper pulls that I'm using are from moremeknow.com. Also rainbow. You can use number 3 zippers, or you can use zippers that already have pulls on them. I prefer to use zipper tape or Zipper by the Yard. I have one magnetic snap, also from Bedazzled Supplies. My hardware is 2 1-inch D-rings and 2 1-inch strap sliders. These are from moremeknow.com also. And then I have seatbelt webbing, already cut for the pieces that I need, and I melted the edges. If any webbing, you want to melt the edges so that it won't fray. So I just use a lighter carefully and hold it along the edge for a few seconds, and it melts that. So this webbing is from Bob and Jen's Odds and Ends. I'm using black for the handle and the connectors, and then I'm using this gray for my straps. So there are several colors there of, there might be more colors right now of the 1 1/4 inch, 1.5 inch, but they also have 1 inch. So okay, and then let's go over the pieces real quick. We have a exterior back main. On each of the exterior pieces, I have a piece of Shape Flex, or I actually used Pixie Fuse Light from Royal Pixie Fabrics, and I'll link them also in the description box. So I use 1 layer of woven interfacing though, a layer of Decoville Light, and then another layer of woven interfacing. And I like the structure that that gives to the bag. You'll notice on the back exterior piece that the box is cut out for the zipper. You want to make sure that when you cut that out, if you have the pattern piece facing up, put it on the glue side of your Decoville Light so that the box will be cut out on the right side, and then your zipper will be here. If you're left-handed, you may want to do it the other way so that the zipper pocket will be on your left side of your back. So this puts the pocket on the right side, so if you wanted to reach around while you're wearing it and unzip it, put your phone in and out of there or whatever, that would be easy to access. The base has woven and then Decoville heavy and then woven. And then we have a front and a back zipper panel. And you'll notice that they have different curves. And that is because the back is slightly taller. Connector piece, or a strap cover, I think I call that. 2 side panels, a flap, pocket flap, a front pocket, and then the exterior front. And then we have all of our lining pieces, which are interfaced with 1 layer of woven interfacing. So lining front main, lining back main, several different pockets. So we have a slip pocket and zipper pockets, and I just go ahead, and I didn't have enough of the lining fabric that I wanted to use, so I have used a few different fabrics. But I just stick a post-it note on them marking what they are, because the rectangles are very similar sizes. So we have interior zipper pocket, back zipper pocket, and interior slip pocket. And then I have my lining flap, which I'll need that soon. And I have the lining pocket, front pocket, lining base panel or bottom panel, 2 lining zipper panels, and then 2 lining side panels. Okay, so that should be all of the pieces. We're going to start with the front exterior and the front pocket. So let me get all of those pieces out. All right, and we will also need our magnetic snap right away. First step is to install the magnetic snap into the exterior front pocket. So I already went ahead and marked my placement, which you can use the pattern piece. I've cut the seam allowance off of this one to cut my Decoville, but go ahead and mark that, and the measurement for where the placement is also listed in the pattern. So I just marked the dot right in the center of that placement mark, and then I'm going to use the washer that comes with the magnetic snap, center the center hole over the dot that I made, and then I'll mark the prong placement. And then I use my seam ripper to cut through on the prong placement only. All right, and then install whichever half of your snap that you want here. This panel already has Decoville light fused to it, so I'm not worried about reinforcing the snap any extra. And I always press my prongs out, but I know some people press them in. I don't know if one way is really stronger than the other. I just like that when I press them out, it lays flatter. Kind of like to use something to push it down. Okay. Mark the dart lines. So again, you would do this before you cut your pattern piece, or I have actually in the instructions to print 2 sets of pattern pieces so that you can use one. I tried to mark this on my fusible interfacing beforehand, but then it is not centered. So I'm just kind of lining this up as best I can and remarking those dart lines. So I definitely recommend printing 2 sets of pattern pieces, especially if you're going to make this more than one time. So that way this might be easier if I find my center first to line this up. So yeah, do what I say in the pattern, not what I do. Print 2 copies. Okay, so we're going to sew the darts. So I fold the pocket piece right sides together, matching the 2 legs of the dart lines, and the point should be right on the fold. And then I'm just going to sew directly along that line, and I'm using a shorter stitch length, and then I backstitch, stitch all the way to the end, and backstitch there as well. And I'm just going to do that on all 4 darts. All right, now here I just have to make sure I'm looking at the right line since I pre-marked them and they were not in the right place. Okay, now we're just going to trim the excess from the back of the dart, and I'm just cutting about 1/8 of an inch away from the stitches. All right, and now I'm going to go to my iron and press the darts. I'll press the darts on the exterior pocket toward the center, press the darts on the lining toward the sides, and that way they'll nest together. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so these darts are pressed toward the center. These darts are pressed toward the sides. So now when I place these right sides together and the darts are facing opposite directions, the seams will just fit together. They kind of nestle in place there. So I'm just going to clip that together first at the darts when I get them matched. And then all the way around the pocket pieces. All right, and I do like to place my clips all in the same direction because the clear side is flat, so it glides along the sewing machine better if those are on the bottom. Okay, now you do want to leave a 3-inch hole for turning this pocket right side out along the top. I'm just going to eyeball. That's probably more than 3 inches, but that's fine. And I just want to make sure that I start and stop at those marks. So now I'm just going to sew all the way around the outside edge, except for between those marks, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So here you should be sewing next to that Decoville light, but not through it. If you do not have Decoville light or cannot find it, you could substitute a foam interfacing, like Soft and Stable or Pellon Flex foam, or fusible fleece. I would recommend Thermolam. It's a little heavier, but either of those could be used in place of Decoville light if you do not have Decoville light, or if you just don't like it, or you can't find it because it is not available in store most places, but you can get it online. I purchased mine from Mary Beth Made It, and she just had a huge pre-sale, which I'm sure she'll do again in the future if it's needed, but she also has retail in stock. So, and I believe Royal Pixie Fabrics also has Decoville Light in stock, which is where I like to get my interfacing that I used, which is Pixie Fuse Light, which is like Shape Flex, but a little bit better. And it comes in 45-inch widths. And so really, I think the price is better per yard. But those are two good sources for buying Decoville Light. Do one more small stitch. Alright, and then I'm going to stop at that mark and back stitch again. Okay, now I'm not going to trim the top edge because that will help my hole to turn in nicer. So I'm just going to clip the corners, and then I'm going to trim the seam allowance down the sides and around the corners and along the bottom down to about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and I'm going to turn the pocket right side out, and I have a stick that I use to poke the corners out. And you might want to leave your hole a little bit bigger than 3 inches. That is 3 inches, so maybe 4 inches is better. Definitely leave an opening bigger than 3 inches. Okay, and then I'm going to go to my iron and press this really well. So I'm just going to make sure that it's turned in 1/2 inch at the hole along the top and press that. And then I'm going to make sure that all of the seams are like rolled out, I guess, nicely. If you kind of roll them between your fingers, make sure that the lining's not poking out like this when you press it, so that the lining is only on the back side. So those are the things I look at. I'm just going to press this really nice and flat. Okay, once the pocket's pressed very flat, I'm going to put a few clips along the top to hold that opening closed, and we're going to top stitch along the opening only, or I'm sorry, along the whole top edge. I've increased my stitch length to 4.5 for my top stitching. You know what, I'm going to use 5. And I had it on 3.5 for sewing. I would use a little bit longer, like a 4 probably, if I was sewing this on vinyl. And I'm top stitching using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Here's an area where you could do a second line of top stitching just for decorative purposes. It would look nice. Okay, now we're going to make the flap. So again, I've already marked my snap placement. So I'm going to cut a scrap of my Decoville light just to give it some extra strength behind the snap. And I'm just going to fuse this to the wrong side of the lining flap. Okay, now we're going to install this snap, this half of the snap in the same manner. So I'm just centering the washer over the hole, or over the dot that I made. Mark the prong placements. And then I'm going in with my seam ripper and just carefully cutting along the 2 lines that I made. Dang it. Alright, and then I know some people will put like a piece of tape or whatever, or another piece of interfacing over the back of the snap so it's not rubbing against the other side of their fabric. Which you can do that if you want. I don't know how well like duct tape would hold up inside of something like this, but a lot of people do that. So all right, I'm placing this right sides together, the 2 pocket panels, and then I'm just going to clip all around the edges, and we're sewing down the sides and across the curved edge only, and we're going to leave this top edge open. And I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to trim the seam allowance. Okay, again, we're going to turn the flap right side out. Okay, and I'm going to go press this nice and flat. Okay, so I pressed that nice and flat. I'm just throwing a few clips along the straight edge to hold it in place, and then I'm going to top stitch down the side. Across the curve, or along the curve, I guess. I'm using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then back up the other side. All right, and then you can also baste the opening closed using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now on my exterior front main, first I'm going to kind of finger press along the seam allowance at the bottom to find the center. I'm just going to go ahead and put a small clip right there so I can find the center later. I need my ruler. So here we want to measure for the medium bag. I want to measure up 8 inches from the raw bottom edge. Raw edge. Oh, sorry. So it needs to be centered, which is at the 6-inch mark. The panel's 12 inches wide. So right now I'm using 2 rulers. I only have a 6-inch wide ruler, so. Okay, so this is 8 inches up from the bottom. I'm going to take my chalk pencil, if I can find it. Okay, I'm going to use my chalk pencil and I'm going to make a mark that is 10 inches wide and 8 inches up from the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to find the center along the top, and I'm going to place the pocket. Well, I guess I didn't really need to find the center. Place the pocket right side up with the raw edge matching to that line. And I don't know if my clips are, not really. So I'll probably put a couple pins in this. And just make sure that the flap stays straight and lined up along that line. And hopefully I don't stab myself. Okay, I think that'll do it. I'm going to make sure real quick that this is centered and straight. It should be just a little bit over an inch from each side. And then I'm going to sew this on using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, remove these pins. Okay, now I'm going to close all of these little strings. I'm going to press the pocket flap up, right sides together with the exterior main, and I'm going to press that crease really well. All right, now I want to sew this using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to mark that with my chalk pencil because I don't have a presser foot that has a 1/2 inch wide foot or seam allowance that I can see like that. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to start on the seam allowance where I top stitched around the pocket, and I'm going to sew from the bottom up to that line and back stitch. To close the sides of this up. And then I'm going to sew directly along that line. And then do the same at the other end. Okay. So now I'm going to place my pocket so that the top lines up directly along the bottom fold of the pocket, or of the flap, and it should be centered. And again, I'm going to pin this in place. On the bottom, it'll kind of puff up, I guess, because of the darts. So I just kind of puff it in place and then flatten it out to put my pin in, if that makes sense. So I puff it up so that I know where I want the edge to be, and then kind of flatten it like that. Okay, So now I'm just going to make sure that my snap lines up correctly, which it does. I mean, once this is pressed down nicely, make sure that everything works. If your snap does not snap, then you can always slide the pocket up a little bit. Okay, now I'm just going to top stitch this on using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and hoping that my pins hold everything in place so that it doesn't shift as I sew. And I just kind of press the darts flat when I sew over them. Oh, I should add that this thread is from Saya Swag Bags. And this is Tex 70. Yes, Tex 70 bonded polyester. And it is excellent thread. And I'm using it on my Juki DDL 8700, which is not a walking foot machine. It's more lightweight industrial. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of pop my darts back out. And again, make sure that my snap snaps, and I'm going to press the top of this pocket down nice and flat so that it's not pulling. Okay, so what I'll need for this is, I need a drink. All right, so I'm using number 5 zipper tape for everything. So I will need, not my zipper yet. We're going to first measure the box. Which will be 1.5 inches from, I'm on the wrong side of the back zipper pocket, exterior zipper pocket. I want to measure 1.5 inches from the left edge. And then I'm going to draw a box that is 8 inches. So let's see. Yep. It'll be 1 inch from the top and 1 inch from the bottom of the pocket raw edges. And then I'm going to go 1/2 inch over from that and draw another 10-inch line, 8-inch line. And then a line at the bottom and top to close that and make it a rectangle. Now I'm going to, the box that I cut out of the Decoville light is right here underneath. So if you did get yours on the other side, not a problem. Just flip this way and your zipper pocket will be on the other side. So I'm just lining this up with the bottom and sides of the exterior back main. And then I'm just going to clip it in place. I try to avoid pins when possible because I generally stab myself with them. These clips are from moremeknow.com. There's another place that sells them. Seems so awesome, I think. Okay, and now I'm just going to sew directly over this box with my shorter stitch length. So I'm going to go back to 3.5. Okay, when you get to the top corner, stop with your needle down and rotate. So now I'm going to cut directly in the center of this box. And you can draw the lines if you want. So I'm just cutting right up the center until I get about 1/2 inch away from one short end, and then I go from that line to each of the corners and cut, but do not cut through your stitching. Okay, now I'm going to pull the pocket through this box and press it nice and flat to the wrong side. So just really take your time on each of the edges to make sure that it's pulled through completely. Okay, the pocket is pressed nice and flat. Now I want to take my zipper tape, and you want to get at least an 8-inch long, or sorry, 10-inch long piece. It could be a 8-inch zipper, which would be the measurement of the teeth only. So like a finished zipper, from zipper stop to zipper stop, 8 inches is the size you would need for this, or longer, because you can always cut your zippers down. Okay, I'm going to put the pull on by separating, and then I put the pull on upside down. So this is the skinny end that closes the zipper, and these are the sides that's separated. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that. So this is separated here, and I look at my zipper tape and I look at which one has the highest tooth. So it's this side. So I put that in first, and then place the other side in, and I kind of look inside the opening so that it's lined up right. And then just slide it down. Make sure that your teeth are lined up right. If they aren't, you'll get like a weird bump on one side because the teeth are misaligned. So there you have it. Now I'll put my zipper tape in place with my double-sided tape. So I'm just going to place this along each side of the zipper, or each long edge, I guess, on the right side of the zipper. And then I'll stick it to the lining side of my back pocket. All right, and how I do this is just one side at a time. It's much easier to work with that way. So I'm just going to, from the right side, get the zipper teeth centered in the hole and press it down onto that tape. Once I have one side lined up properly, okay, then I'll go ahead and remove the paper from the tape on the other side. And then press that side in place as well. Okay, now we're just going to top stitch around the zipper, and I'm using my longer stitch length again. And I think the double-sided tape, one of the questions that people ask me a lot is, does it gum up my needle? And it does, but it's never been a big issue. So I try to place it so that I'm not always sewing through it. Sometimes that can't be avoided though. So, I mean, if my needle gets sticky, I can really just kind of wipe the sticky right off with my fingers. So it's never been a big issue for me. Okay, now I'm just trimming my threads. And you'll notice I always trim all my threads as I go. I don't like to finish my bag and have a bunch of threads hanging everywhere. And I'm also going, if my interfacing is not properly lined up, I just like to trim it off just so I'm lining things up with the edge of the fabric and not the edge of the crooked interfacing. Okay, so first I'm just going to match up the top edge. And then from the right side, I'll just fold the main panel back out of the way, and I'm going to sew this using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, and then I'm going to match everything up along the sides and the bottom and clip that all together. And then I'll just baste around that using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Oh, you can trim away the excess here. It's most important on the small because the pocket gets in the way of the strap support piece. Okay, and then I'm going to trim this little bit of extra zipper tape from the bottom with my good scissors, why not? Okay, so we have the back zipper pocket installed. Now I'm going to place the strap support in place. So we have those 2 pieces of unfused stuff. We have an unfused piece of Deco Heavy and 1 unfused piece of woven interfacing. So right now I'm going to find the center. The back is wider than the front, so where the front was 12 inches wide, the back is more like 12 3/4 of an inch wide. So the center of that is not going to be exactly at 6 inches. It's going to be 6 3/8. Okay, so I marked the center there, and I want to measure 1.5 inches down from the top. Let's see. One and a half. Okay, and then I want to measure or draw a straight line here, and it does not matter how wide you make it since this is all on the wrong side. All right, and then I have my strap support piece, and I'm going to just fold it in half to find the center, and then I'll center that at the line, and I'm going to fuse that in place. Okay, so I fused that in place, and I would like to point out on the small, the placement of the strap support, it goes just beneath the pocket, so you just kind of lift this pocket edge up and place it under in the right position and iron it in place. On the medium and large, it does not. All right, so now I'm kind of gonna just set that aside for now. We're going to take the exterior strap support woven piece, or exterior strap support piece, place it right sides together with the woven piece that's not fused to anything. So the bumpy side is up away from the fabric. And I'm just going to, first, we need to cut a hole, just a line down the center of the woven interfacing, just like that. Okay, now I'm placing it right sides together with the fabric, and I'm just going to clip all the way around the raw edges, and we're going to sew this together all the way around, because then we'll turn it through the hole that we just made. Okay, I'm using my shorter stitch length of 3.5 and 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. Now I'm going to trim the seam allowance down all the way around this piece to about 1/8 of an inch. I cut the corners off first so they're nice and close to the stitching. Now I'm going to turn this right side out through the hole and press the interfacing to the wrong side. So I'm going to go do that at my... Okay, so the interfacing is all pressed to the wrong side and my strap support piece is not finished. So I'm going to set that aside with this, and we're going to make all the strap parts. Okay, now also remember what I said with the webbing, that I melted the edges. So I cut these at 4 inches and I did change the pattern to be 5 inches so you have a little extra room to work with. So we are going to fold 1 inch of each connector to the back. And how I do this and keep them even is I'm going to measure 2 inches from one of the short ends and make a mark. And I'll do that on each connector. I like that I just flipped that over so I could like do it on the wrong side even though both sides are the same. Did I already say that this webbing is from Bob and Jen's Odds and Ends? I think I did. My double-sided tape. So I'm just going to take a tiny piece of this and place it directly above that line. And then place the D-ring and fold the top of the webbing back to that line exactly. And that's how you make sure you have exactly 1 inch folded to the back and that they stay even. All right, now I'm going to first sew directly beneath my hardware as close to the hardware as possible, using my longer stitch length for this. So first I'm going to sew a box, and then we're going to sew an X inside of it. So I sew from beneath the hardware to kind of like the end of where that webbing is folded back. And if you need to mark this out on the right side, and then sew on the lines you mark, you can do that. So back up. And now I'm going to sew from that corner down to the bottom corner of my box. All right, and then I'm sewing directly along that line again. And then from that bottom corner up to the other top corner. And then back along the top line. And here I'll backstitch. So that just makes your straps very secure. And I'll repeat that on the other connector. Oh, I did include like a little diagram of which order to do the stitching in the pattern, so. So both of the connectors are completed, and now we'll add the slide things to the strap. So this I'm going to fold 1.5 inches to the back. So I'm going to measure 3 inches from the short end. And then I'm just placing this above the line on each. And then I'll slide the end of the strap over the center bar like this and stick the short end, bring it down to the line and stick it to the tape, just like that. And then I'll repeat that on the other side. Bring it up through the top, over the center bar, and back down through the bottom. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to sew that the exact same way. And I slide the slider as far up as possible like that. And this is just the same exact method of sewing the box with the X in the center. And my straps tangled up. All right, same process on this one. Okay, now with the strap wrong side up, so you can see the raw edge of the webbing there, make sure that it's not twisted. Slide one of the connectors on right side up, so the wrong side of the webbing is back there, and slide it down, and then slide the raw end up through the bottom of the connector, or the swivel, nope, slider, over the bar and back down. So you have a loop with the connector, and everything now is right side up. See, and here's what the back looks like. And then the raw end of the strap is inside the center, and this one is at the back. So it should look like that. So we'll do that again. Strap is facing with the wrong side up. Make sure that the end is not twisted. Slide the raw end through the connector, which is right side up. And then bring the raw end of the strap through the slider, over the bar, and down through the other side. And then make sure that, obviously, that it slides right. Okay, So now we're going to attach this to the bag. Okay, so on the right side of the back, move my zip out of the way, I want to measure down 3 inches from the top and centered. Remember, my center mark is about at 6 3/8. This ruler is 3 inches wide, so that was a good guess. So first I'm going to mark the center, and then I'm going to draw a line. Okay, and I'm going to attach everything at once, which I did before and it seemed to work well. So I'm just going to place a line of tape all the way along that line. And then I'll actually put one more line up above. Okay, so first I have my handle piece, which I believe for the medium I've cut at 10 inches. Yep. And I'm going to fold it like this, like a backpack handle is. And I'm lining that up with the center mark. So the center is right between those two pieces. I'm pressing that into the tape. And then the straps, it's the top of the strap and it's right side down. So my hardware is facing down. And then I want the strap lined up with that line as well to either side of the handle piece. Just like that. And the other one is the same way. Just make sure that they're both right side down. Okay, so everything is stuck in place. I'm going to kind of pull away the extra tape here so I don't get it caught on my presser foot when I sew. And you can pin this in place if you want. I just love the tape, makes everything easier, I think. All right, now you can sew an individual box and X on each of these if you want. What I'm going to do I'm just going to sew one huge box and X across the whole thing. So starting at the bottom corner, I'm just sewing like 1/8 of an inch from the bottom. So first I'm just sewing a box. I went up about 4 stitches. You want to keep it less than 1 inch. Do not go up more than 1 inch here. Now I'm just sewing another line straight across. Okay, so I've completed the box. Now I'm going to sew the X lines through the center. top, and here you can back stitch again if you want along the top, but there will be more sewing done when we sew the support piece on. So there's a lot of stitching holding these straps in place. My box, or my X should have crossed here in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's all going to be covered up. Okay, now you want to measure 2 inches down from the top. Where's my chalk pencil? Okay, which is 1 inch up from the line that you previously made. So I find it easier actually to measure 1 inch up from the bottom of the straps. Okay, I have my strap support. I'm going to kind of finger press that to find the center. And then I'm going to use a few strips of tape on the back of that. Okay, so my center, the long straight edge will be along the top, and I'm just lining up that center mark that I made with the center of the handle along that line. And then you can measure from each strap to the end to make sure that it's centered, and each should be about 1 inch. I'm going to scoot it over just a tiny bit. Jeez. Okay, and press that down. And now we're going to sew all the way around this using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Let me trim my threads before. So I just take it nice and slow around the curves to keep them nicely curved. I do a lot of hand cranking in areas like that. And I just ran out of bobbin thread at like a convenient time. So when does that happen? Oh, sorry. But I think that feels like a good time for a break because I didn't have breakfast yet. So when we come back, we will sew the connectors in place at the bottom. Okay, so let's see. I've marked already my strap placement lines, which are transferred from the back main pattern piece. So I'm going to go ahead and line up my strap within those marks, and I make sure that the bottom corner of the strap connector is matched with the edge, the raw edge of the back main. And it should be at a 45-degree angle. And then I'm just going to baste that in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And obviously you can clip them or pin it in place as well. I just hold it down and make sure that when you do this that your straps aren't twisted. And I'll repeat that on the other side. Okay. I'm going to make sure once again that my straps aren't twisted because that would be bad to find out after you're finished. Okay, so we're going to go on now to make the interior zipper pocket. For the interior zipper pocket, I'm using, it's the lining front main. So it's the one that's a little bit smaller. And first I'm going to take one of my interior zipper pocket panels and mark my box, which will be 9 inches wide. It is 1 inch from the top raw edge, and then we'll stop 1 inch from each end, and it's 9 inches long. And then 1/2 inch beneath that line. We'll make another line. And then a line from each to connect it. All right, now I want to place that right sides together. I'm going to finger press this to find the center. And I'm going to do the same with my lining front main. Okay, and now I want to place this 1/2 inch up from the bottom. All right. Now I'm just going to pin this in place. All right, now I want to sew directly along that box. and I'll use a shorter stitch length for this, so I'm going to go with a stitch length of 3. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing that we did when we made the back pocket, the exterior back pocket, and cut down the center of the box. So I'm just going to cut until I'm about 1/2 inch away from the end, and then from that line cut to each of the corners. All right, now I'm going to pull this through so that it's wrong sides together with the front main. Okay, now we're going to install the zipper here. Okay, which I'm just gonna, again, use the same number 5 zipper tape. So I want to cut it so that it's as wide as the pocket, which the measurements are given in the pattern. And same process, open one end a little bit, slide both halves in. That's it. Okay, now I'm going to use my double-sided tape. So doing this 1/2 at a time. I just kind of guess when I'm looking at the back of it, and then flip it over and line it up and press it down onto the tape. And then I'll lift this back out of the way and remove the paper from the second half of the tape, or the other side, I'm sorry, of the zipper, of the double-sided tape. And push that down into place. All right, and now we'll just top stitch all the way around this box back to my longer stitch length, and I'm using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We'll place the 2 interior zipper pockets right sides together. Clearly didn't match the edges up very well. Let's try this again. Okay, and then from the right side, folding the lining front main out of the way, we'll just sew the 2 interior zipper pocket panels together. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And now I'm going to trim the seam allowance down, which will just make it easier when you're attaching the panels later. Easier in the sense that it's out of your way. Just make sure you're not cutting through your lining main panel. Alright, so this pocket is yet again different fabric. Because I didn't have enough of anything that I wanted to use. Alright, and I'm placing them right sides together, matching up all the edges, and then I'm just going to clip them together along one long straight edge. And I'm going to sew that together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, and then you can trim the seam allowance down if you want to reduce bulk, but it's not absolutely necessary. I'm going to flip these two panels wrong sides together and press that top seam. Okay, now I'm going to top stitch this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, now remember here, or think about this, I guess, when you're making yours. If you want a snap or anything, to go ahead and put it on that pocket now. Or you could attach like a webbing strap kind of that comes down from the top and goes over this so that it will hold like a device in here. This is probably too small for most laptops, but maybe like a Chromebook would fit. So just keep that in mind if you want anything to hold the pocket closed. Or you can also put like a piece of foam inside the pocket if you want to use that for a device to kind of help protect it. So I'm just lining that up with the sides and the bottom of the back lining panel. And now I'm just going to baste it in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to make the zipper panels. Alright, so the first thing I want to do, I did not already cut my zipper. And again, the measurements are listed in the pattern, or you can do this. It's sewn onto the long straight edge of the zipper panels, so I'm just going to lay it in place and cut it. now this one is going to be a double pull zipper. So what I'll do is line it up, and I'm just going to do the same thing on both ends of the zipper. And I just have to make sure it's lined up right though. If you get that like bump on one side, that means that the teeth are misaligned. Okay. And I have 2 zipper pulls. All right, so first I'm taking, it doesn't really matter, but the exterior lining front piece, or exterior front zipper panel. I'm gonna trim that extra interfacing away. All right, so I want my zipper to be right sides together with this. Okay, and I'll sew this in place using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to move the zipper pulls out of the way when I get to that part. And you could always, if you're using zipper by the yard, you can put the pulls on after you sew them into the zipper panels, or after you sew the zipper tape into the zipper panels, and then put the pulls on, so that you don't have to worry about moving them out of the way. I actually did that when I made the large, and everything's just flatter that way, so it's kind of nice. All right, now I want the lining, and I'm going to place that right sides together with the exterior front zipper panel. So make sure they're the ones with the same curve. And I'm going to clip this together all the way along. Just make sure it lines up. And I'm going to sew it with the exterior panel facing up, right over my other stitch or seam line. But the only thing here that I want to change or do differently, which I think you can work your way around it if you don't, but I'm going to keep it this way. Go ahead and mark 5/8 of an inch from the end. And do that on both sides, both ends. And we're only going to sew from one 5/8 inch mark to the other, not all the way to the ends. And this is when you attach the lining that you do that. And I'm just sewing directly over my last line of stitching. So that means this is also a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Slide my zipper pulls out of the way. And I'm going to sew right to that line. Okay. Stop and backstitch. All right, I'm going to press the 2 zipper panels wrong sides together and away from the zipper. All right, so those are pressed wrong sides together and away from the zipper. I'm going to place a couple clips just to hold things in place so that I know nothing is like, I don't know, just out of place. Okay, now I want to also measure 5/8 of an inch from the end and make a mark on each end. Make sure you're using like an erasable marking tool. And then we're going to top stitch only from one mark to the other mark. Down the entire length of the zipper. And then remember to stop at the other mark. And backstitch. Okay, now I'm going to repeat that process to attach the back zipper panels. Oops, to the straight edge. Both zipper panels, it's the straight edge that you attach to the zipper, not the curved edge. And the zipper is right side down on the right side of the fabric, the exterior fabric. All right, now this I'm going to sew all the way down the length of the zipper. Okay, now let's measure and mark our 5/8 of an inch from each end. Okay, and we're going to place the lining panel right sides together with the other lining that's already attached. And I'm gonna sew directly over the line that I sewed already. So I put it exterior, wrong side up in front of me. And I'm going to start sewing at the 5/8 inch mark. And just sew directly over the last line of sewing. Moving my zipper pulls out of the way. Back stitch when you get to the other line. Okay, now I'm going to go press these panels wrong sides together and away from the zipper. All right, now I'm going to again mark 5/8 of an inch from each end. And I'm only going to top stitch between those marks. Back to my stitch length of 5. No. Let's top stitch this way. now we're going to attach the side panels. So I like to sew on my exterior first. It doesn't really matter. Just place it right side together and make sure that your lining zipper panels are not being sewn in this step. So only the exterior zipper panels and the zipper are clipped in place to the exterior side panel. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm sewing through the exterior only. Across the zipper. And also the other exterior. Make sure that you have these the panels oriented the correct direction, because they are a little bit longer than they are wide. Go ahead and trim this little bit of extra zipper tape, and my exterior is a little bit longer right there. Okay, so now again I'm just going to attach this to the exterior only. And the zipper. Half-inch seam allowance. Just do not sew through the lining. Now I would recommend when you cut these out to mark which is the top and which is the sides. Let me see. Okay, so they're a little bit taller than they are wide, so these are the tops. I'm just going to mark that now so I don't mess up. All right, so I want to place this right sides together with the lining zipper panels. And here the zipper will not be in this seam. I'm just going to start sewing from one end using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm sewing through the lining zipper panels and the lining side panel only. I'll show you exactly what that looks like in a second. So I'm folding back where the zipper is. Okay, so here there's a gap at the end of the zipper, and I sewed through the lining panels only. So these are still separate. The lining and the exterior are completely separate, and that's important for being able to turn the bag right side out later. and sewing it in a way that we are turning it instead of using binding. This is like the alternative to making a bag with binding or drop-in lining. All right, so again, I'm clipping only the lining. And then when I sew it, I'll fold the zipper back out of the way. So it's just gonna be across the zipper, the lining zipper panels and the lining side panel. Now I think this step might be a little bit confusing when you read it in the pattern. So right now what I'm doing, I'm looking at my lining side only, and right here where you can see that the seam allowance next to the zipper is folded back, I'm going to cut into the seam allowance up to the line of stitching next to where that's folded back alongside the zipper. So this section now can be separated from the rest of the seam allowance. This section of the lining that's behind the zipper. And I'm going to clip the lining back on itself so it's out of the way, except for that part beneath the zipper. And here's where we're going to top stitch this. Along the side panel, and it will go through that one small portion only of the lining just to close the hole that's left at the end of the zipper, the way that this is sewn. So we'll repeat that with the other side. I'm trimming the lining only right where the lining is folded back next to the zipper, not through the stitches. Lining only. And then I'll fold this part of the lining back on itself and clip it so it's out of the way. And then I'm going to top stitch through this portion and through only that little piece of the lining. Now I'm going to press the lining down, but we don't need to top stitch the lining side. All right, now we're going to mark centers on everything. So I'll fold the side panels in half. And I'm just going to place the tiniest little snip in the edge of the fabric where the center is. Let me not do that with my little snips. I use these ones. Just make sure that you're not going in farther than like 1/8 of an inch or so. You don't want to accidentally clip past where your seam allowance is. Okay, we want to do the top or the zipper panels. So I'm just finger press it, and then I'm going to put just a little snip right there. And I'm matching up the seams on the side panel and then finding the center that way. All of the main panels. I think I'm gonna have to cave and turn my air conditioner on. I was trying not to, but it's getting pretty toasty in here. I know that it can be pretty noisy. And also anywhere that I have extra interfacing, I'm going to just trim that off. Same with this one. My exterior, I think, yep, I already marked the bottom center of the front. It's going to be a little harder to mark the center of the top because I cannot really fold it in half that easily with the front pocket sewn in place. So I'm going to use my lining front main to mark the center. I'm just lining up the center of the lining main with the exterior main. Alright, and then the back. And I have a little bit of extra interfacing there to trim off, and some of the pocket panel that was sticking out. And then the top center, which I have a line marked from when I placed my interfacing piece here. Alright, so sorry about that. I know that the air conditioner can be loud, but it's really hot. Okay, marking the centers along the short sides and the long sides. And then I'm going to use the lining with the marks on it and line it up with my exterior and make my snips like that. Okay, so now I have all of the centers marked. So we are going to start with the main front main, front exterior main. So we want to unzip our zippers, the main top zipper and the zipper pocket zipper. Okay, first we want to do the exterior. So with my exterior front main right side up, I want to place the concave curve. So that's like the curved in side. I want to match that up first on the top center. And I'm going to sew with the main panel actually facing up. So I'll turn it this way. So I'm just matching these right sides together, and first I match at the front center or top center or whatever you want to call it. And I'll place a couple of clips there, and then I'm going to match the bottom corners. And I'm folding the lining zipper panels and lining side panels back out of the way as I do this. And I do it in such a way that like the zipper panels fit around the main panel. Like it's not gonna, you can't do it laying flat. And then I just ease it the rest of the way around through the curves. And you might have some wrinkles along the edge of your zipper panel or your main panel like this, which is fine because the points that match up is actually at the seam line. So 1/2 inch in from the raw edge is the line that should match up perfectly. Alright, so we're going to sew this together, making sure to keep our lining panels folded back out of the way. And I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and my 3.5 stitch length. going to use my stiletto. Which is just like a pointy tool to hold things together where you can't get your fingers in. Or you don't want to put your fingers. So anywhere down by the needle. Alright, so once you've sewn that entire seam, check to make sure that everything looks good from the right side, that you don't have any creases or anything in your stitch line. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim this seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. Make sure that you're not cutting any of your lining. Okay, now we're going to repeat that with the lining front main. So I'm just squishing everything else down inside. I want the same side of the zipper panel, yeah, that is already sewn onto the other front main. And I'm just going to flip everything else down inside and then put this right sides together and do the same exact thing. So a few clips at the top center, and then I'll match each of the bottom corners. Now the only difference is when you sew the lining, we're going to use a 5/8 inch seam allowance just to help it fit inside of the exterior better. So here I'm just easing around the curves. Okay, now we're doing the same thing, but using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to start at the bottom and make sure that your interior zipper pocket is pulled back out of the way. This would be helpful to have like 3 hands. I'm just going to put some clips on here to hold it out of my way. Okay. All right, now I'm again going to check to make sure that everything is right on the inside, that I didn't catch anything in that seam that I shouldn't have. Okay, and now I'm going to trim that seam allowance down as well. Now I'm going to flip these 2 panels wrong sides together. Here's where you can get your first glimpse of what your finished bag is going to look like. Looks pretty nice. Okay, now kind of push it so it's like lining side out. With the other part of the zipper panel facing up, and again make sure all of your zippers are unzipped. I want to fold my lining zipper panel back out of the way. I'm going to take my back main and I want to kind of clip the straps up together so that they are not getting caught in my seam also. Fold the handle portion back down. Alright, so then I'm just matching the top centers, same process. Exterior is 1/2 inch seam allowance, lining is 5/8. The back zipper pocket does not have to be unzipped. Process here, 1/2 inch seam allowance. As you sew over the strap connector ends, you might want to backstitch. I would suggest that you do backstitch. Again, I'm going to use my stiletto as I go around the curves here, just to hold things together. Especially where I cannot get my fingers in or it's not safe to put my fingers. Make sure that you're not getting any puckers under the needle. kind of back stitching because I got my seam allowance got a little small there. So I just kind of back stitch to get back on track. Back stitch over the ends of the webbing. Now I'm just going to, again, from the inside, check to make sure nothing got sewn into that seam that I didn't want to be, that I don't have any weird puckers in my fabric or anything. Everything seems good. So now I'm going to trim this seam allowance with the exception of the strap end. So I'm going to trim just the bottom here on each side, which really is the most important part, so that you don't have that extra seam allowance when you sew the bottom panels on. And then I'll go above my webbing and continue and trim all the way around. Okay, now one more. So for this one, we're just going to kind of squish everything. We want it this way. Squish everything down and out of the way. And we want to place the lining zipper panel right sides together with the lining back main. And it's just the same exact process again, 4 times. This one's probably the most difficult just because you have everything kind of squished down. And when you sew it, you have to kind of maneuver everything. But I think I still like this better than doing binding or drop-ins. So it would definitely be easy enough to change this to a drop-in lining or a bound lining if that is your choice. I don't know if somebody will maybe do a video of that. People, I won't be. I know sometimes people do the videos to show different ways to do things. So Lauren Wormino already filmed a video, I think, of this small bag, and she changed the front pocket to a zipper pocket, and it's the same way that the pocket's done on her marsupial hip pouch, I think it is, and the same way that it is on my Consuela clutch. It's still the shaped pocket, and you sew the zipper into the top of that and then sew the pocket down on the front of the bag. So definitely check her video out if you want to see that method. It's really cute with the zipper pocket. Like, I really like it. Alright, so once again, 5/8 inch seam allowance. And you may want to, as you sew across the top of your pocket, the lining slip pocket in the back, you may want to back stitch there, and then also when you trim the seam allowance down, don't trim it too close at the top of that pocket, just to help reinforce that, because that's something that will, you know, people will reach in and out of that pocket a lot, put things in there, dig in it. You don't want it to pull out of the seam allowance. Alright, let me check this seam. Feels good, nothing is sewn into it that shouldn't be. So go ahead and trim the seam allowance. The top of my pocket is here, so I'm just going to kind of leave a little extra at that point. Right now, let's sew the bottom panels on. You're so close to being done. So I'm going to sew the lining bottom panel in place first. And I'm matching the center marks on the main panels first to the center mark on the longer side of the bottom panel. Now I'm matching the center marks on the side with the center mark on the side panel. And I do kind of fold my seam allowance toward the side panels a little bit. I don't like take extra special care to press it or anything, but we are so close. And I am ready for lunch, so. Okay. Now I'm just going to sew around the lining bottom using a 5/8 inch seam allowance, folding the exterior back out of the way, and the lining interior zipper pocket, I just fold that up between the layers. And 5/8 inch seam allowance. And this is one of those spots where people like to use staples, and I think that's a good idea for this bag with the oval bottom, because sometimes as you work your way around, the clips can pop off. Staple it, so then your base doesn't shift. Trim that seam allowance. Just be careful as you trim around all of the seam allowances to make sure that you don't get anything else in the way and cut through something that you don't plan to cut through. Okay, one more base panel, and then we'll turn it and sew our pocket closed, and that's it. So close, and I'm so ready to be done. All right, let's see. Do I care what way my bottom panel is oriented? It doesn't really matter. Same process. I'm matching the centers on the main panels to the centers on the long side of the bottom panel first. and then I'll match the short ends. Didn't do a very good job of marking. Oh, I found it. Clipped like the tiniest little clip into my center there, so. And here you will be sewing right around that Decoville heavy that's in the bottom, not through it. Oh, that's my zipper. I couldn't figure out. I thought there was webbing sticking out of the bottom, and that would be bad because no webbing should have been there. One last panel to sew on, and this is using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you might want to use your zipper foot for this, that can make it easier. last seam. I'm just going to look it over, make sure nothing looks real super funky, and go ahead and trim this down. All right, now I need to turn it right side out, which you're not going to see because I have to do it like in my lap. But I'm pulling everything out through this pocket. Okay, the bag is turned right side out. And I've gone ahead and pressed the raw edges of the interior zipper pocket inside by 1/2 inch. And now I'm just going to top stitch that closed. You can also hand stitch that closed if you want, but I don't think anybody really pulls out the bottom of the pocket to see what your stitching looks like there, so. 90% of the time, if I make a bag just for myself, I don't even sew the pocket closed, so. Which is real interesting when you forget and you're using it and you put your stuff in it and then later you reach in to find all your stuff and it's not there because it's floating around in the inside of your bag. Okay, so I just push the pocket down inside of the zipper, and then I'll give the bag a final press, but we're done. So this is the medium size. I don't have the other two in here with me right now, but I will post pictures of all of the sizes with each other as a comparison. The medium is, this is the medium. The small is like a very mini size. Like just definitely a purse. I think this size could work well for like a kindergartner or toddler. I think it would probably hold a folder. I don't think it's big enough to hold like textbooks. It's probably not big enough for like high schoolers. But probably could work as a small diaper bag or something. The mini is just definitely a little tiny purse size, or for like a really small like toddler that just wants a backpack. And the large is like gargantuan. It's huge. So I like the medium is my favorite size. So there's everything. If you wanted to put pockets here on the side for like a water bottle, I would suggest making the whole exterior or making the whole zipper panel with the side panels attached, and then maybe using mesh with elastic at the top, and you could even put that up a little bit higher, just as long as you only sew it to the exterior, and then you could have some pockets on the side for like a water bottle or whatever. So that's it. There's also, like I said, Lauren Mormino did a video, or I think she's doing 2 videos, one for the small and one for the medium. So check those out, and yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions, and don't forget to subscribe and give me a thumbs up. And I'm super excited to release this pattern and to get on to the next thing. So thanks for watching.